For a long time, magicians and mentalists have clashed about the need for a disclaimer and the level of honesty required in a frankly dishonest profession. Should you tell your audiences you're a fake? Or should they understand that this is theater? After all, Superman doesn't need to announce that he's really just an actor. If you perform magic or mentalism, the question is, how far would you go to convince your audiences that what you do is real? The context of this discussion is the latest magic book release by Vanishing Inc. called Bend It Like Geller. Geller, of course, referring to Uri Geller, the Israeli psychic, a popular figure in the world since the early 70s. 2023 marks the 50th anniversary of his entrance into the public eye and the limelight. The author of Bend It Like Geller, Ben Harris, has been on the front lines watching Uri Geller since basically the very beginning. So why is Geller so controversial, and what can we learn from him and his techniques that may be able to help us as magicians and mentalists? The author answers these questions and more with the help of some of the contributors to this book. As we get into this episode, you should be aware that I work for Vanishing Inc. and you can see that story here. So definitely make up your own mind about the book and about Uri Geller for that matter. Regardless of my affiliation, I think there's a lot we can learn from looking at Uri Geller in this episode within the context of this new book. So what is the book? It is a beautiful hardback book with over 225 pages. Ben Harris has previously published a number of topical magic books, including books on mutilating cards, the Svengali principle, and an older book already exposing Geller-like feats and how you can do them. Early in his career, Ben Harris debated Uri Geller on TV about him being a psychic and has followed his career closely since then. They've ended up becoming friends over the last 50 years, and this book is an examination of how Uri Geller came into popularity, what are the techniques that he uses, and how can you use those techniques combined with psychology to impact your audiences. As a Vanishing Inc. release, it is lavishly produced with pictures from the contributing artists, as well as hand-drawn illustrations for the explanation sections of the metal bending effects. It's essentially a hybrid coffee table style book centered around mentalism and the rise of Uri Geller. It's hybrid in that much of it is factual or history-based, covering this meteoric rise of Uri and the metal bending phenomenon, but it also shows you how to bend objects yourself, covering the history of magical efforts to replicate the phenomenon displayed by Uri Geller. It also explains how to bend objects yourself, covering the history of magical effects designed to replicate the feats Uri Geller has been promoting for almost 50 years, allegedly through psychic means. And to me, that's the real question raised by the book. If Uri Geller really is a psychic in touch with extraterrestrials, how is it that magicians can replicate his performances through explainable means? Let's dig into the meat of the book and examine whether this is something you want in your library, and then we'll cover what we can learn from Uri Geller, his career, and how that can apply to our performances. To answer the question about whether or not you want this in your library, a lot of that will depend on your interest in performing mental style metal bending, or how interested you are in the history of Uri Geller. For me, I've always loved metal bending, and in fact, used to do some of it when I was younger, although I have not had it in my act for a long time. I've personally purchased a number of products over the years to facilitate metal bending, and many of those techniques and gimmicks are actually explained here in this book. Frankly, reading through this book has made me reevaluate whether I might want to have some tactical metal bending in my shows to increase the impact. If you're interested in learning to bend silverware, be it metal or plastic, keys, coins, or even wooden objects like chopsticks, then this book will teach you how. But more importantly, it goes over the psychology of how to sell an effect like this, and some of the presentational aspects you can use to increase the impact. The subtext is that you should be studying the master, Uri Geller. If you know nothing about bending metal, then this is a complete course, although it is more of a survey course. You will definitely learn all of the techniques in psychology like I've already mentioned, but in addition, in the back, there is a fairly comprehensive bibliography that you can look to further your education. In addition, you'll be introduced to a number of modern day magic and mentalism practitioners who deploy metal bending in their own acts so that you know where to go for those next steps. You'll hear from mentalism luminaries like David Berglass, Elaine New, Richard Osterlin, Peter Turner, Richard Bush, and others. The book walks a fairly fine line because while it's certainly written from a skeptical point of view, after all, Ben Harris is one of the original people who went after Uri Geller in the public eye to debunk his claims, it's very interesting to read the perspectives of many of these magicians who were living it at the time, who knew about the techniques of spoon bending and other types of metal bending, and yet they were fooled by Uri's performances. And to me, that brings us to the most interesting part of the Uri Geller phenomenon, his commitment to the part. For 50 years, Uri has never once, as far as I'm aware, admitted that what he has done is done through trickery. Instead, he consistently claims that he has a real psychic gift. And that's part of what separates Uri from the rest of the pack. If you want to understand Uri Geller's success, we need to go to the cinema. We need to understand a little bit about acting. In the world of acting, there are several different schools of thought on how one should learn to act. One of those tactics is called method acting. A somewhat simplified explanation is that the person playing the part learned to think, behave, move, and act like the person they're trying to portray. But the catch is, they don't turn that off. They live, eat, and breathe that part, including when they go home. Unlike most magicians who perform at whatever venue they're at and go home and be a normal person, Uri takes a completely different approach. He's always the psychic Uri Geller, totally committed to his character. And that frankly seems to have worked for him. I'm not advocating that it's the path that you and I should take, but I don't think there's any denying that it's worked out. And it reminds me of another household name in magic, Harry Houdini. Houdini built a reputation for being the man that no shackles or prison could hold, and he went to elaborate lengths to ensure that he could always come out on top of any situation, even when he was challenged in the street. So the first takeaway that I have from this book is that if you're going to have a character with a certain ability, you need to be prepared to demonstrate that ability and portray it everywhere you go. If you want to genuinely fool people and make them question their reality, that may not be the goal, but if you do, then you need to be prepared at all times to give a small demonstration of the types of entertainment that you provide. In addition, you'll need to have emotionally engaging presentations, and many of the essays in this book address that very thing, talking about how to make the impact higher, how to give your audience a reason to care and a reason to buy in. And the author points out right away at the beginning of the book that this is the real magic of Uri Geller. If you can use your mind to manifest physical things like bending metal, then the implications are simply enormous. There's nothing that the human mind could not do if it can do these things as Uri Geller does. Obviously, most of us will never ascend to the same level as Uri Geller, but if you have this book, you can certainly give it a shot. The other thing I noticed in this book is that many of the contributors are actually skeptics and not people who really believe in what Uri does, and yet they've become friends with him. And I think there's a lesson there. If you want people to believe in you, you have to be likable. If you watch some of the older clips that are out on YouTube of Uri Geller, whenever he accomplished something, it was typically part of a team effort. He wanted everyone to believe, and if it didn't work, it was because someone didn't believe. They talk about that here in the book and the framework that a psychic needs to use to be able to defend why things don't work all of the time. But if you can get your audience to buy into you, to like you, and to want to succeed as a group, you'll already be miles ahead of most other magicians and mentalists. The book is $50 at retail, and I think it presents some very interesting ideas for how we can evolve our own characters or maybe adapt ways to make what we do more interesting to an audience. And of course, if you like metal bending or Uri Geller, then I think the book is a slam dunk. If you're interested in learning more about mentalism and how you can get started down that path, be sure to check out this video. And if you'd like to understand more about theory and how to become a better magician, then be sure to check out this video. As always, my friends, I appreciate you watching. And until next time, keep reading.